Well, I always used to say he'd be a flip-flop mayor, Sadiq Khan, if he got the gig, but I was only half right. He has been a flop mayor, as at the coming up to the second anniversary of his period in office, more and more people are concluding, even before the shocking realization that London had become a capital of murder and mayhem, where people are afraid to allow their children out in the evening, except that it's also now happening in broad daylight. And the mayor is doing nothing about it, saying nothing about it. No rocking, no rolling, no campaigning, no use of the bully pulpit of City Hall in a way that no other person who occupied that position surely would ever have allowed. Let's face the facts. Whatever we think of either Ken Livingstone or Boris Johnson, or even conceivably both of them, they were both big political figures, big political hitters. Everyone knew them. If they came into a room, everyone knew it. And both of them were better mayors than the mayor we currently have in Sadiq Khan. He is a failed experiment. It's a controversial point, I know, but I'm in a good position to make it. No one can credibly accuse me of either racism or Islamophobia. Sadiq Khan only got the Labour nomination because of the colour of his skin and because of his religious faith. That's the truth of the matter. It was a politically correct statement. He was not the best candidate for the job, as everyone participating in the process knew. Everyone knew that there were other candidates, maybe more than one, who would have done a better job as mayor than he would do, but they were passed over for this failed experiment. And similarly, when the election came, Sadiq Khan won the contest quite handsomely against a very ugly Conservative campaign because of the better instinct of Londoners who did not want to reward the frankly racist and Islamophobic campaign of Zach Goldsmith, a man who should never live down what he did in that mayoral campaign. And I suspect, looking at the stoop in his gait, hasn't himself lived it down. The best instinct of Londoners was to show that we would elect a man of colour, we would elect a Muslim as mayor in the teeth of racist and Islamophobic abuse. Fair play to Londoners, but they cannot have expected that his first 2 years would be such a dismal flop. Do you know that Sadiq Khan, who campaigned more or less daily on the shortage of affordable rental housing in London, do you know how many affordable rental houses Sadiq Khan built in his first year in office? Never mind built, even laid a brick. Just try that question. Laid a brick. How many bricks did Sadiq Khan lay of affordable rental housing in his first year in office? I'll give you the answer to save you looking it up. It was zero. None. Zilch. It was none. Now, he has started building something like 1,700 in his second year, though virtually none of them qualify as genuinely affordable rental housing. Who said so? Well, him, actually, not me, because they're going to be at rents that he described, not me, in his mayoral election campaign as not affordable at all. So on that front, he has failed miserably. On the roads, on congestion, on public transport, he has failed miserably. In case you're wondering where he is to answer these charges, well, we asked him again today. We asked him every day to come on this show, but he doesn't have the guts to do it, just like one or two others. Now, I could go on about what he chooses to do with his time instead of what he should be doing. I referred to it last night. Sadiq Khan, until very recently, was in perpetual motion as a key plotter against Jeremy Corbyn, the man without whom he could neither have been selected or elected. But no sooner, and I mean no sooner, than he got the mayoral robes around his not-so-broad shoulders, he started turning on Corbyn. He is one of the plotters-in-chief, and until very recently, he really fancied his chances of succeeding Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party. Indeed, only last week, Tristram Hunt, the lantern-jawed big palooka, who now runs a museum somewhere, but formerly, improbably, was the Labour Member of Parliament for Stoke, he called on Sadiq Khan to break away from Labour, form his own party, and challenge Jeremy Corbyn's Labour. The first time that any of the Blairites have been so brazen to make such a point in public, as opposed to private where they're doing it, of course, all the time. He is often to be found at carefully stage-managed and excruciatingly press-released. I learn, actually, from my first guest this evening, that Sadiq Khan writes the press release. In fact, my young son, aged 10, asked me if we could play football in the five-a-side pitches across the road. He said, can you not phone up the owner? I said, the owner is the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. And my son asked, does Sadiq Khan operate the gate? And I said, well, he'd be as well doing so because he's not doing anything more important than operating the gate on the five-a-side pitch opposite Talksport Towers. You can find him correcting and rewriting press releases which read so risibly that virtually nobody publishes them, because boring is Sadiq Khan's middle name. I could go on about his fetish for other minority issues. Transgender was his latest cause célèbre, and all that's fine. I'm a supporter of the transgender people myself. I'm a big supporter of LGBTQ rights, and indeed was many years, maybe decades, before Sadiq Khan turned on to the programme. But if getting on for 60 of my citizens had been murdered on the streets in the first 4 months of this year, I might be paying a bit more attention to that than to his other causes. I'll tell you what I definitely would. I definitely would have visited the families, the bereaved. I definitely would have called them if I couldn't have visited them. Sadiq Khan has done neither. I'd definitely be out on the streets of Hackney, of Tottenham and the other boroughs where people are going down like flies. 20 people a day in London are going to hospital with stab wounds, quite apart from those who are going to the morgue with stab wounds, and an increasing number with gunshot wounds. You'd find me out there trying to find out what was going on, and you'd find me literally chained to the railings outside Parliament, refusing to leave there until Theresa May and Amber Rudd released the funds to re-employ the thousands upon thousands of London police officers who've been sacked, and in whose absence a crime wave worse than New York City has burst upon the capital. He hasn't done any of that, and the only thing he said was yesterday, when he said a task force of 140 officers will now move in to the areas. Well, that'll make a big difference. Too little, too late, Sadiq. You don't need 140 officers. You need 1,400 officers. Maybe you need 14,000 officers. Maybe you need officers from out of London. Maybe you need the armed services. Maybe you need a new civilian defence force. Maybe, but you need to get a bit more urgent about this, or this will be your last term as Mayor of London, which was always your intention because you intended returning to Parliament as the leader of the Labour Party at the end of your first term. That position is now unlikely to be vacant, and even if it was vacant, you'd be frankly the last man in the world who would be elected to it. So either get off the pot and go and form your new party, or start doing what people are paying you a rather handsome stipend to do. I'll be talking to Andrew Gilligan, who's written an amazing piece in The Spectator summarising the first 2 years of Mayor Sadiq Khan. But I'll also be talking, how can I not, about the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. Curiouser and curiouser gets the Skripal affair. Let me just pose this question to you, dear listeners. What do you think public opinion in Britain and the wider world will make of the fact that the British government, and don't tell me it was a clerk in the embassy in Moscow, please, don't try that one. The British government has just refused a visa to the cousin, the closest surviving relative of the Skripal father and daughter, stricken in hospital in England and the centre of an international brouhaha of rare proportions. Can you think of any good reason why the British government would refuse a visa to their relative to come and see them, or even to bury their pets that were allowed to die inside their house with no food and no water, a cat and 2 guinea pigs, the Salisbury 3, slain, not by military-grade nerve agent, but slain by the idiocy or worse of the people who were standing outside the door while the cat and the guinea pigs perished for the want of a drop of water in rainy Salisbury. If it wasn't for that cousin, to whom we've just denied a visa, we would not know that Yulia was better. We would not know she was planning to discharge herself from hospital and return home to Russia. We would not know that Mr. Skripal, who just days ago we were told had a 1% chance of life, days ago we were told that his life support may have to be switched off. If not for that cousin, we would not know that both of these patients were recovering rapidly. Maybe that's the reason why she's not getting a visa, because she told us what the government did not want us to know. It's curiouser, but the forensic gaze, which grinds, exceeding fine, of the mother of all talk shows, is on the case.
Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about some insanity that's happening in Great Britain, because this is truly crazy. So apparently there's been a wild upswing in the amount of murder in London. Well, that's not a tremendous shock, considering that the demographics of London have changed, that the policing in London has changed wildly, that the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is really terrible at his job. But the murder rate in London now outstrips the murder rate in New York, which is pretty incredible, actually. Right? The murder rate in Britain has always been extraordinarily low. This is why when people say, well, you ban guns in Britain, that's why the murder rate is low. The murder rate was low before the bans on guns. And the murder rate in Britain was always quite low. Okay, but here is what it says according to Today Online. On Thursday, April 5th, 5 teenagers were stabbed in an hour and a half before sunset, including a boy of 13. All these attacks took place in London over the past week, part of an apparent spike in violence in the British capital. After a long period of steady declines in violent crime, the city has averaged in excess of 3 killings a week so far this year. More than 50 people have been killed in London since the start of 2018. The total for all of 2017, a year when the city suffered multiple deadly terrorist attacks, was 116. Criminologists have expressed caution about drawing conclusions from only a few months' figures, but if the uptick continues, it will amount to London's highest level of violence in more than a decade. A year with 200 homicides for a city of 8.5 million people would be far from a shocking high in the U.S. New York City had 292 murders last year, according to the 2018 Police Commissioner's report. That was a record low, but right now London's murder rate is outstripping the murder rate in New York City, which is, again, a pretty incredible thing. So I do love what they're now talking about in London. They're now talking about banning knives. No joke. So they're using the exact same logic they used about guns, and now they're applying it to knives. So Sadiq Khan has announced a broad new knife control policy designed to keep, quote-unquote, weapons of war out of the hands of Londoners looking to cause others harm. The UK Parliament is considering bills that would restrict the manufacture and purchase of kitchen cooking knives because they have points on them, because they're pointy things. So I guess machetes would still be okay, like the one that guy used a couple of years ago, that Muslim terrorist used to chop down an actual British soldier on the streets of London. And that'll still be okay, because as we all know, machetes aren't really dangerous. Like from every horror film, we know machetes aren't dangerous, only knives are dangerous. But they're going to start determining how exactly knives are distributed. The tough immediate measures involve an incredible police crackdown, a ban on home deliveries of knives and acid, and expanding law enforcement stop and search powers so the police may stop anyone they believe to be a threat or planning a knife or acid attack. Khan announced Friday the city has created a, quote, violent crime task force of 120 officers tasked with rooting out knife-wielding individuals in public spaces, and is pumping nearly $50 million into the Metropolitan Police Department so they can better arm themselves against knife attacks. He's also empowering the Met Police to introduce targeted patrols with extra stop and search powers for areas worst affected, according to a statement. Now, one of the what's really kind of hilarious here is that one of the reasons that the crime rate is going up is because Khan is responsible for, according to Emily Zanotti at the Daily Wire, for decreasing the number of stop and searches, having previously declared the tactic racist and potentially Islamophobic.